My name's Leo and I'm a boat builder and a sailor, and I'm on a mission to rebuild and restore this 111-year-old classic sailing yacht, Tally-Ho. So this is going to be an exciting couple of weeks for us because we are hopefully going to be hanging the last of the planks, and that'll finish of course with the very last plank, the Whisky Plank. I know you guys have seen quite a bit of planking already, but it's going to be a bit different this time because we're going to be getting to the shutter planks, which are a little bit different and are very, very satisfying to make and to put in place. So now it's time for me to start making shutter planks. Shutter planks are planks that go in a gap with a plank on either side of them already, and they're called shutter planks because they literally shut that gap. I'm starting off with the forward planks on either side, and I'm actually not going to bother patterning these, they're really very straight. So I'm just going to cut them straight and define their widths by measurements from the boat. Any shape that does need to be in the plank will easily be edge set into it as it's hammered into place. But I will probably pattern the aft planks on either side because they're quite long and they have a lot more curve to them. Putting that much edge set into a shutter could be problematic, especially at the butt joint, because at the end of a plank it's much harder to get the leverage to bend it in its right shape.
I'm headed out. I've had an amazing time here helping Leo and the rest of the people here working on this boat. It feels like a huge privilege to have been able to help with such a massive and insane project that stuff like this doesn't come along super often. I'm going home to see my parents who are going insane because they miss me so much. So
Aww.
I figured I would.
You're going to see your brother, Danny?
Yes, I am going to see Danny. I actually might move in with Danny.
Nice.
Danny accidentally hit himself in the head with an axe the other week. Did I tell you that?
Yeah, you did.
But his head and his head gasket are both okay.
That's good. Yeah, thanks Matt. It's been really, really awesome having you here. You've been great. Your work's been great. You've been a great part of the team. It's been a pleasure. So I hope you come back.
You too.
So now that we have closed up the majority of the hull, we can't use the normal the bucking clamps, the normal riveting clamps. So we've got to experiment and come up with some alternative solutions, and this is one. It's called the lever. It uses leverage. Check it. So this side is on the back of the rivet. We've got a fulcrum here, and then I get to push all the way out here. You better show this piece of copper what you're made out of, David. David versus the copper. Who's gonna win?
David? I think.
Yeah! Nice job.
Yeah. I got you. Don't worry.
So this will be the first shutter plank to go on the boat, and obviously it's going to go in this gap here. Fitting a shutter plank is just a little bit trickier than cutting a regular plank, because obviously the size has got to fit exactly the hole, rather than where there's an empty gap on one side. It doesn't matter quite so much if it's, you know, a tiny bit larger or smaller than you planned. In fact, you usually want to make the shutter plank just a tiny bit larger than the hole, so that it's going to make a nice tight seam on either side, and actually it's going to push the planks on either side away from it a little bit as it goes in, and tighten up all the other seams in this area. Obviously you can't get clamps in here where there's no gaps on either side, so I know some people have been wondering how we're going to fit these, and well, you'll see soon enough, but basically the answer is brute force. Hopefully this fits. It's been a little while since I've made a shutter plank.
That was pretty satisfying.
Nice. Super satisfying. Oh yeah. Yeah. All right, Rowan, hit it. Yeah, stop. Well, that shutter plank didn't go too badly at all. In fact, it went pretty well. It was a nice tight fit, and hammering a shutter plank like this into place, especially when it's a good fit first time, is probably one of the most satisfying things in the world, I think. Certainly one of the most satisfying things that you get to do as a boat builder. We also took down the rain cover this morning over the side portion of the shed, and that's really nice because it means that from the road now you can actually get a really nice view of the boat, and just see her lines and see her shear line, and I'm happy to say it looks really great from over there. How's that working?
Pretty good. I've only dropped it twice, and we've done like 3 rivets so far.
Okay.
Wouldn't you say that's pretty good, David?
I'd say that's about as good as it gets, man. You're 1 away from 3 out of 3.
In order to buck this rivet, I need to push the buck into the boat. But I don't have anywhere to stand or get a good footing to provide that force. So instead of pushing, I've decided to try to pull.
So can you just explain that you're sitting on that rope?
Oh yeah. So this rope is stopping the buck from falling down, and then this rope is allowing my body weight to apply pressure to the rivet head.
So you're sitting on it? It's quite hard to see that you're sitting on it. So if you could just
want you to say sitting on it.
yeah.
Yep. I'm sitting on the rope.
Don't say it like that.
So the first shutter plank is in, and now I've got to start making the aft shutter plank. Now I already talked about how the width of the shutter planks is more critical, has to be more precise, and of course that means that the patterning process also has to be a bit more precise than for a normal plank. Now there's lots of different ways to pattern for planks. Most shipwrights have their own methods which they like. There's no real right or wrong here. I actually didn't pattern the forward shutter plank at all because it was relatively straight and relatively short, so I actually just got the widths for that plank by just measuring with dividers the width of the hole between the two planks on the boat on each frame. Then I added a little extra width, and the amount you add on a shutter plank really depends on the whole situation, how much you want to move the planks around it, and how difficult you think it's going to be to get in place. On that first shutter plank I just made, I added 1mm to the width on the inside of the plank. That's just over 1/32 of an inch, and that seemed like a really good amount to add. It was a very nice tight fit, but it wasn't impossible to get in. Now for the aft plank though, there's a lot more shape in it, and so I do want to make a pattern. It's a lot of shape to edge set, especially in a shutter plank, and it's very hard to edge set the end of planks right next to the butt because you don't get much leverage there. So again, there's lots of different ways to pattern for a plank. Some people might do a plywood pattern with glue tabs on top and bottom. Some people might use a spiling block and sort of scribe a line for the top and bottom. They're all good ways, but personally I actually prefer, when I'm doing a shutter plank, to use glue tabs but just pattern for one side of the plank, and so that doesn't give you the widths of the plank, but it just gives you the shape of the plank. And then I prefer to actually get my widths again by measuring the actual gap between the planks on either side using dividers on each frame. Of course you also have to record and transfer the bevels, the angles of the edges of the planks above and below the shutter plank. Those are rolling, changing bevels, and you have to cut those same bevels into the shutter plank that you're cutting out so that the edges of the planks are all nice and tight. I actually made sure when I made the planks above and below the shutter plank that their edges would both be open bevels, so that the shutter plank is sort of going into this like open wedge shape almost, and that helps make it easier to get the plank in, and it makes it so that the seams get tighter as the plank moves back against the frame. Now you also will have noticed that we've been using more screws as we get into these later planks, and that's simply because we're getting into the areas where there's a lot of stuff on the inside of the frames, so the beam shelf, the stringer, hanging knees, breast hooks, things like that, which prevent us from actually riveting all the way through the frames. Now the lower shutter planks, which Pete's going to be making, they're going to be fastened almost entirely with screws because they're almost directly behind the build stringers on either side of the boat. We actually did that on purpose. We wanted to have our shutter planks where they would be screwed rather than riveted, because it's much harder to rivet a plank when you aren't able to get the bucking clamp around through the gap. So on that final plank where there's no space on either side, it makes sense to have that being the plank that has to get screwed. Whew. That was quite a bit of planking information. I think I might have fried my brain a little bit. I hope some of it made sense.
Da Well, there's a few big differences with shutter planks, but getting them in place is usually kind of a little bit of a challenge. Just it's a little different. You don't have any clampage. You can't clamp anywhere. The plank itself will kind of hold itself in once you start whacking on it with hammers. If it's a good snug fit. If you pin one end and then pin the other end in though, you get a big bulge in the middle usually. And if you have that one end, the wild end clamped too tight, you can't really get the wrinkles out. So usually I'll start an end in, get some screws in place, start beating it in. Depending on where on the boat the shutter plank is, you know, if you have one real low down, you can usually use some pokes, like a 4x4 cut to various lengths. There's a lot of different ways to help push them in. You can use a jack, you can use what we call a porta power, which is actually an automotive tool. Pretty much anytime you have access, like over in the yard, usually there's a lot of space around the boat. So we've used forklifts. A forklift works really well to push a plank in. It's a little scary sometimes, but with a team, 2 people, one guy up there holding a block on the fork to get onto the plank and the other guy driving, and it'll really push it in there. So same concept, you add a little pressure and then whack it in with a block. So anyway, and then there's a few things we do to help get them in a little easier. Besides all that, we really chamfer the inside corners of the plank. So every plank I make, I soften the corners. That's kind of a general rule, to soften all your edges. But on a shutter plank, I make it a real soft round over on the inside, and so that'll prevent it from digging into the plank above and below it, and because it will start cutting grain and kind of jamming in there. But so a good round edge on that inside corners, and then we oil up the whole plank. Obviously the whole back face, but the edges too. So I'll oil the edges of the neighboring planks and the shutter plank, and that just a little bit of linseed oil and boat soup, linseed oil, pine tar, sometimes just linseed oil. But that really helps it slide right in. We're still planking the boat, but we're almost done. We're doing a shutter plank here. So my first shutter down here, got it all oiled up. Hopefully it pops right in. Might be a little tight, but that's okay.
You gotta go through here.
Just whale on it.
Is it gonna go in, feet?
Yeah, I think so. In a minute.
So at this point I have finished the 4 topside shutter planks. That was extremely satisfying. So they're all on the boat and they're being fastened. Pete is now working on the lower shutter planks. Of course I wouldn't want to deprive him of that pleasure, so I'm gonna let him finish those on his own. It's time for me now to trim off the ends of the planks where they overhang the transom.
Another light one. Real light. A little harder. Yeah, perfect.
So just behind me, Pete and Rowan and David are just getting ready to hang the penultimate plank on the boat. So the second to last plank in the final strake, and so they'll be putting the forward plank in first, and then next, probably tomorrow, the Whisky Plank, the very final plank, will be going in the aft part of this strake, and that'll be it. The boat will be planked. Yep. Okay, so I finally managed to get these trimmed a little earlier today. I'm really pleased with how the boat looks. Since they've been trimmed, it's quite a transformation. I did find that the grain was starting to split out a little bit in the caulking seams, so I made a bunch of these little wedges, which are the same sort of shape and size as the caulking seam, and then I was able to just gently tap those into position and then cut those with the planks, and that prevented any tear out, any splitting of the grain in the caulking seams, and then these wedges just popped out afterwards. I did catch the varnish in a couple of places with a router, just because this old transom, original transom, is not completely flat. It's pretty close, but that's no problem. We're going to be giving this some more coats of varnish soon anyway. And it's going to look even better when the planks are faired and the seams are paid, and then the hull is painted, and it'll be painted white or just off white all the way around to this line here, so the ends of the planks will be white, and then of course the transom will remain varnished, and it should be really striking and look really good. So the boat is now very nearly fully planked. Pete has hung 3 of his 4 shutter planks, so there's just one more plank down here, the final plank of the boat, which is of course the Whisky Plank, named because it is celebrated with whiskey traditionally, and we intend to do so here. So we'll be hanging this tomorrow, and if you would like to join us for a drink of whiskey or whatever else you happen to have on hand to toast the boat once this final plank is in place, then pause the video now, get a drink, and you'll be ready to raise a glass with us in a few minutes.
So I hold in my hand here the last clench ring to go on the boat. Everything else from this point on is screws or bolts as far as planking goes. So there's a lot of painting to follow up after this, but it's a nice milestone to remember. The final clench ring.
Very good. Do the honours.
Nice and clean rivet to go on. Oh, so satisfying.
So it is finally time to hang the final plank on the boat, the Whisky Plank. Now I've decided I'm going to live stream this plank going on, so that means I'm going to let the other guys hang it, and I'm going to be filming it. The only way I can actually live stream is directly from my phone from here, so I'm going to be running around with my phone and also trying to get decent footage on the 3 other cameras that I use for this video. So it might be a little chaotic, but hopefully I'll manage to get some usable footage. We do also have a special guest today, somebody very familiar who has been given the day off from their new job to be here today. So without further ado, let's hang the Whisky Plank. So the Whisky Plank is in. It feels fantastic. The boat looks like a boat. She's fully planked, and it's incredibly satisfying. The guys did a great job of getting that last plank in. But now the next step, of course, is to have a drink of whiskey to celebrate, and we actually received a few bottles of very nice whiskey from our very kind viewers, so thank you for that. You know who you are. So if you have some whiskey yourself or any other beverage of your choice, then please drink along with us. So the first shot of whiskey has to go to the boat, of course, so we make a toast to the vessel and to all the people that have worked on her. So tally ho, cheers.
I'm drinking whiskey, that's what I'm doing. What of it?
I'm drinking whiskey. What of it?
Yeah. Oh yeah.
Come here, you wanna come up here? Yeah, you wanna come up here?
Well, the whiskey plank is in, the boat is planked up. We all drank quite a bit of whiskey and now I'm editing this video with a bit of a hangover. But I couldn't be happier. I think it's amazing. The boat looks fantastic. I just want to thank everyone who's been involved in this project in any shape or form really. But especially right now, I want to thank the planking crew, Pete, David, Rowan, Rosie, Matt, just an amazing crew to have, a great team, and couldn't have done it without them. Thanks also to all the people who have helped in the past, either on this property or from further afield. Huge thanks to my hosts here for being so generous and gracious, and a massive thanks to all you guys for watching these videos, for sharing them with your friends, for supporting this project and making it possible for us to do what we do, and also making it possible for me to film and document that, make these videos and release them online for free as a entertainment and as a resource. So I can't overstate my gratitude for the community that has come together to make this possible. So I'm going to quit rambling now. I think it's time for a few days off after I've finished this video. So thanks again, and I'll see you in a couple of weeks. God. Overwhelming to see the amount of work
to do here, but what a beautiful boat.